Good morning. We're gonna try to move this along this morning because members want to be at the National Cathedral this morning for the celebration of the life of Nelson Mandela, and so I'm going to ask all our members of leadership to try to be as brief as possible so we can yield the rest of the time to Chris Van Hollen, the Budget Committee ranking member. Mr. Clyburn, who is a member of the leadership, will speak as well, and Ms. Nita Lowey, who is another member of the conference committee. And so if I could just let them speak on the budget, I just will say one thing, some decent news, some good news, and that is that today we've learned that some 1.2 million people in America have gained health insurance coverage as a result of the Affordable Care Act, over 360,000 under the marketplace, having applied directly through the marketplace, and some 800,000 through Medicaid. And we know that another 1.9 million Americans have already started the application process and simply need to choose which option they'd like to have. So some 3 million Americans today, we can say, will have health security, something they did not have before. Clearly, Americans want health security, and they're signing up for affordable insurance under the Affordable Care Act. And like the American people, Democrats want to make sure the health security law works. We don't want to shut it down. And so now on the issue of hopefully no more shutdowns, we want to be able to start talking about moving forward on the budget so we can get to the real work of the American people, which is creating jobs, raising the minimum wage, and making sure all those who want to work in America have a chance to get a good job. With that, let me yield to our leader. Oh, we're going to go straight to the budget. So let me yield now to Mr. Van Hollen and Mr. Clyburn and Ms. Lowey.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra, and it's great to be here with my colleagues and fellow conferees, Mr. Clyburn and Ms. Lowey. This was a hard-fought negotiation, and I want to thank Leader Pelosi and my fellow conferees for making it clear as recently as 12 to 24 hours ago that the way the agreement was taking shape would absolutely not be acceptable to members of the Democratic caucus. It's now in a form where members of our caucus will have to decide for themselves. Speaking individually, my view is that it is a small step in the right direction because we are able to restore many of the cuts that would otherwise take place as a result of the sequester, those very deep and immediate cuts. And it especially is good at restoring some of the cuts that would have taken place in important domestic investments in our kids' education, in science and research at places like the National Institutes of Health, law enforcement. In those kind of areas, this will help restore almost 2/3 of the cuts that would have otherwise taken place in fiscal year 2014. And I believe that the way those cuts are paid for is not at all perfect, but a lot more equitable than it was 48 hours ago. Our caucus will have to look at the details as individuals, and obviously we'll be doing that over the next couple days. With that, I will yield to Mr. Clyburn, one of the conferees.
Thank you, Mr. Van Hollen. I am very, very pleased to stand here today in support of this legislation. I want to say, as Mr. Van Hollen has said yesterday afternoon, I was very, very ambivalent about where all this was going. But I'm pleased that with Mr. Van Hollen's very, very strong work and the sensitivities of Senator Murray, with whom I have worked on these budget issues before. You remember the super committee. It turns out after Biden, the committee group and the super committee, and now this effort, third time, is in fact the charm. I want to say one thing, though. A lot of headlines going out in reference to federal employees. I want to emphasize now that nothing in this agreement affects current federal employees. All of this has to do with federal employees who will be going to work for the government after January 1, 2014. nothing affects current federal employees. Because I have so many of them in my district, and there's so many around the District of Columbia, I don't want anybody having any anxieties between now and the conclusion of this effort. With that, I would like to yield to Ms. Nita Lowey.
Thank you very much. As you know, many times when we all get here, everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. I just want to add a few points. Number one, as an appropriator, since this bill has restored 2/3 of the dollars for appropriations, we will now be able to write appropriation bills. Number two, I am not happy with the 2% cut to Medicare providers, but it does not go to beneficiaries. Number three, I think it is absolutely urgent that we restore and continue the unemployment insurance benefits. It is absolutely outrageous that we should leave this Congress and go home for the holidays when too many people, over 1 million people, will not be getting their unemployment benefits. So overall, I do think it's important that we were able to work together. But I want to make it clear, if we get the House back, it will be an even better bill. And when it comes to the National Institutes of Health, education, jobs, the economy, we can do better. But I think this is the best that we can do at this point.
Let me ask the leader for a quick comment, and also our vice chair.
I want to thank our conferees for their leadership and their effectiveness, and their opinion is important. Their opinions are important to our caucus. However, they are very familiar with the particulars of the legislation, and our caucus is just finding all of this out this morning. And so they will carefully review the provisions of the proposal and ask questions of our conferees, and members will make their decision. I don't know where that will come down because, as you know, our budget that Mr. Van Hollen and our conferees were putting forth was quite different. It was about growth. It was about investing in infrastructure and short-term growth and long-term growth, investing in early childhood learning. It was about ending the sequester, but doing so in a way that enabled us, again, to support growth as well as to extend the unemployment benefits, unemployment insurance. It's absolutely unconscionable that we could possibly even consider leaving Washington, D.C. without extending those benefits. Some of you were at our steering policy hearing the other day, a few days ago, and saw the impact that it has on the individual lives. People work hard and play by the rules. The work ethic is strong and respected in our country, and for people losing jobs through no fault of their own in an economy that has people with master's degrees going to entry-level jobs just to be able to have some income so they can stay in their homes. It's a remarkable thing. And why would you ask, why would the Republicans not just automatically do this? It's our responsibility to do this. Perhaps they don't believe in that. And that's the fight that we have to make. So again, I thank our conferees for their leadership. Their opinions are important to us. Members will make their own decisions as to where we go with this. And again, we would have preferred something quite different, but we do recognize the value of coming to a decision so that we can go forward with some clarity on other legislation that we want to see. If we had included immigration, that brings over $150 billion early on, $900 billion over time. Could have helped in this budget agreement if we had closed even a couple of tax loopholes, but that was off limits as well. We would not have to go to user fees for TSA or anything on the public employees. But I think that that our conferees did a really good job in mitigating for the damage to the federal employees and holding off even much bigger cuts for them that the Republicans had in mind. So we'll see. We're waiting to hear what the response is from the Republicans. Our members are now studying this, and will do so very prayerfully as we leave here to go to celebrate the life and legacy and and also register our sadness on the loss of President Mandela. We have a large delegation that is still coming home from the funeral in South Africa. We look forward to hearing their report on that as well. But you'll have to stay tuned to hear just exactly where our caucus will be going on this.
Let me make sure that Vice Chair has a chance to say.
I'll be very brief. I want to join the leader in congratulating, or at least saying well done to our conferees as well. This budget deal, I don't believe on first blush is representative of the values of our overall conference in total, but there are very good aspects to it. And as we mull through it and go through it, each member will decide how they will vote on this, as the leader has said. But let me say this. I received an email this morning from a very, very good friend of mine who lives on Long Island. He's been out of work for quite some time. His unemployment is running out at the end of this month. He's married with children. He just worked out a deal with the bank that holds his mortgage, that they will allow for a $25 payment for the next 5 months. But at the end of the 5 months, he has to come up with all of the mortgage payments that will be due. That's the kind of pressure that many Americans are facing right now. They're losing their homes. He asked me about food stamps. He said, we've already seen a cut in our food stamps. And this is before the holidays. And he's asking me whether or not, as someone who's in the know, whether or not unemployment insurance will be extended. That's a real life, and that's a friend of mine. I think every American in all likelihood has an example of that. And what's the answer to him and to his family? Under the Republican-led Congress, the answer so far has been no. And unfortunately, it looks as though we will leave here this week without addressing unemployment insurance. It's unconscionable and it's immoral.
We'll take one or two questions. Xavier, go right ahead.
Did you vote for this deal now that it doesn't include UI? Are you a yes vote?
We haven't even seen the finished product. We're hearing this morning that now there may be another amendment joined to it about SGR, which are payments to docs, which is interesting. It's something we should do. But why wouldn't we do unemployment insurance if we're doing that? So when they freeze the design on what it is we're going to vote for, I'll solidify my thinking on the subject.
Yes, go ahead.
When are we going to see this bill pass, and what happened to immigration? Do we need to wait until next year?
I asked the speaker that question yesterday, and he told me, yes, we'll have to wait until next year.
We can allow members to continue to answer questions, but we need to get over to the Mandela ceremony. So those who wish to stay will be able to stay to answer any questions. With that, we will close this press conference. Thank you very much.
Okay.